Hello, this is Dr. Ada Gonzalez, and today I'm going to walk you through the do's and don'ts of communication. These communication guidelines I have developed as a result of the research for the book that I wrote called Transformative Conversations, and it's based on the latest research on how our brains work when we are in relationship with other people. The quality of your relationship is based on the quality of your communication. And if your communication falls apart, so will your relationship. So I want you to be able to restore effective communication and bring connection and joy back to your relationship. That's my motivation for doing this infographic that you have in front of you about the communication guidelines. But I wanted to give you, besides the simple infographic, a few ideas on how to apply them. So let's start with the first do. Create a safe space. Sometimes couples get in trouble even before they start talking because they already are bringing an attitude that is not conducive to good communication. And it has a lot to do with the first don't. Don't be rude or loud. Even if you disagree, you can do so with courtesy and with respect. If you know that the other person, as soon as you open your mouth, is going to hit you with a 4x4 and is going to respond to interrupt you and to respond in an irrespectful way, you probably will not want to talk. You will not want to open up and say anything. And if you do, both of you will end up escalating and getting into an angry exchange. And that's not good for your relationship. The second do is keep it short. You know, sometimes, especially we women, have this bad habit many times of going on and on, but it's not exclusive of women. I know men that do the same thing. It has more to do with your personality, really. But the problem is our brains have a limited capacity for focusing. And if you are talking too long in a big, huge monologue, the other person will start thinking about something else or thinking what to respond to you. And the moment they start doing that, they will probably interrupt, which is the second don't. Don't interrupt, because if you don't let the other person finish their thoughts, you cannot really know where the other person was going. But that's why keeping it short helps, because that way the other person doesn't get confused and they can respond to one thing at a time. And also you have to keep on one issue at a time, because sometimes couples start talking about, I don't know, why didn't you bring the milk from the store? And they end up talking about the history of the relationship during the last 5 years. And that doesn't work. You have to keep to just one thing at a time. Otherwise, it's very, very confusing. So keep it short and don't interrupt. Sometimes you might have to do something physical, have something in your hand that you pass to each other to remind yourself that when you have it in your hand, you have the platform, you are talking. The other person doesn't interrupt you, they just listen, they focus on what you are saying. The other do is bring an open mind to the conversation. Don't come to the conversation already convinced that you have the only truth. Instead of bringing an open mind in which you are curious, you are in learning mode, you can be flexible, you can be humble, because sometimes you might be wrong. And it will make problem solving easier if you keep that open mind. So that's very important, that you don't paint yourself in a corner by already coming with a totally set idea of I am right and you are wrong. On the don't side, don't judge and defend, because you don't have to be always right, and in fact, you are not always right. So you need to let go of your ego and remain open to seek and hear the opinions of your partner. It takes a certain amount of humbleness to be able to be in a relationship, because otherwise you become so egotistical that you feel you have to defend everything. And a defensive stance doesn't help. Same like judging everything that the other person says doesn't help either. Especially if you tend to attack the other person and think that they are the worst thing possible. You know, I hear couples say very hurtful things like, well, you are always such a liar. Well, wait a second, the person might have told you a lie or two, but that doesn't necessarily convert them into a liar that never says any truth. You are bringing judgment there when you make it just a personal thing. The other do is listen to understand. Don't listen to defend. That goes together with what we were just talking about. Listen to understand. And listening is a very active position. It's not passive. It requires all of your attention. Your ears, your eyes, your heart, your undivided attention. That's how the Chinese paint the symbol for listening. It requires your total presence. You need to be present in the moment. Don't go back on vacation. Don't go back to your office. Don't go back to what happened yesterday. If you are listening to a conversation right now, you have to keep being present. At the same time, on the don't side, don't assume. Don't react based on your assumptions, because assumptions are not fact or truth. You need to check them out. And this is very difficult because you know the other person. You might be right on your assumptions, let's say even 50% of the time. But what about the other 50% of the time when you are not right? That's why you need to check it out. Otherwise, you might find yourself reacting negatively to something that you didn't need to react that way just because you made an assumption and didn't check it out. So it's better to ask more questions to make sure that you are understanding totally what the meaning of what the other person is saying is. Don't stop when the other person stops and is saying something to you and you think you listen well. Don't just answer right away. Ask a couple of questions that will clarify meanings to make sure that you are not making an assumption that could be false and could escalate the conversation. Then the other do is ask and answer. Don't get tired of asking and answering questions. Be genuinely curious and open so that you can know more about the other person and about whatever you are talking about. Yet a word of caution is, usually it's not a good idea to start a question with the word why. Why is this? Because we tend to become defensive when we hear why, and we think that the other person is attacking us when they say why. Or we don't have a good answer for the why, and so we become defensive about it. So a rule of thumb is don't start a question with why. It's better to ask what happened, what is it. It's better to say, tell me more about it. It's better to ask, I want to understand better, to say, I want to understand better, tell me more. Just don't ask why, because it's like a time bomb. It tends to explode on your face. The other don't is don't ignore conflict. A lot of people don't like conflict. But ignoring conflict only adds fuel to the fire because eventually you cannot ignore it anymore. I tend to illustrate this with thinking that you have in the middle of your living room a white elephant that you are trying to cover with a rock and ignore. Well, the bulk is there, and even if everybody is walking around it and trying to pretend they don't see the bulk, it's there. And eventually the elephant is going to rear up and you will have to confront it. So ignoring is not a good idea because you build up feelings and ideas inside of you, and the more you think about it without talking about it, the worse it can get. Take the time to let the dialogue evolve and to explain and to explore what is possible instead of ignoring the conflict. But when you bring something that could be conflicted, make sure that you start in a soft way. Don't start with an accusation. Don't start saying something like, "You always do this and that makes me very mad." No, don't use absolutes, because when you use absolutes, the other person will remember the one time 15 years ago when it was not that way. Start with a soft start. Saying something like, I have been trying to talk to you about this, and I'm kind of afraid of doing it because I really don't want to stir up something, but I really need to feel that you love me. And the way I feel you love me is when you are more expressive, when you tell me that you love me, and when you give me more hugs and get my hand or put your arm around me. That makes me feel loved, and I really need to feel more of that. Now that's a softer start than if you say, "I really think you don't love me at all because you never express your love and you don't put your arms around me, and I'm so tired of feeling totally empty." Do you see the difference? On the one hand, you are expressing a need. On the other hand, you are accusing the person that they don't love you. So make a soft start if you are bringing up something that could be conflicted. The last do that I want to mention is reflect. Take time to be silent, to think, to reflect, to talk about what just happened. Even if you have a totally good conversation, take the time to reflect. Did we finish saying what we wanted to say? Did we solve the problem that we were trying to solve? Is there anything else that we need to add to the conversation? Or if it is a conflicting issue, is this one of those conflicts that really doesn't have resolution and we need to learn to live with it in a way that we can stand it? Or is this a conflict that we need more information to be able to solve? Or are we satisfied with the way that we went about it? So reflecting is a good practice, because the only way to learn from mistakes is to reflect, see what happened, and plan. What am I going to do different next time? And the last don't is don't tell lies, because you need to embrace honesty with yourself and with the other person if your relationship is going to be a positive one. And this includes words, being authentic, not pretend, and having integrity. Lies always put a wedge in between people, and it breaks trust. Even if you think it's a simple lie or a simple omission, when the other person finds out that you were lying or that you were omitting a truth that was important for them to know, it crushes their trust in you, and it takes a lot of time and effort to rebuild trust. So make a real decision with yourself that even when it is difficult, you are not going to tell lies. You are going to speak with the truth. A lot of people say, I prefer you to hurt me with the truth than to hide behind lies. And lying can become a really bad habit, very difficult to break away from. And I have seen many relationships derail because of lying. So this is in a nutshell what communication guidelines are. And I hope that you find it helpful. A lot of the couples I work with decide to print them out. Some even put them between plastic and have them around them when they are having conversations, because it's easier to remember some of those points if you visually have them there. So I invite you to do something similar, because it can be really important. It can be a good thing for you. Second suggestion I have for you is to take one or two of these guidelines at a time and focus on it for a couple of weeks. Trying to change habits in communication is not too easy, and if you try to change all of them at one time, it becomes impossible. You become discouraged and you stop. So it's better to take just one of them. Let's say that your tendency is to go on and to really present long sentences. Well, just you focus in the next 2 weeks, let's say, to keep shorter your communication, to speak for a minute or two and then stop, or better yet, to speak for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and then stop and let the other person make comments on what you are saying. Focus just on that. Or if you tend to interrupt a lot, just focus on not interrupting. Make yourself bite your tongue and go back to listening instead of to thinking what to answer, and don't interrupt. So just take one by one some of these suggestions instead of trying to do them all at once. These guidelines are just an introduction to communication for couples. I have a longer program that takes 6 weeks, and it's called the Effective Communication Program for couples. And I encourage you to go down and click on that red button that says learn more about the program. It will take you to a page where I explain what the program is about. And I really want to encourage you to decide to take that program, because communication is the basis for connection and for a happy relationship. If your communication is going well, you are going to have more happiness and more connection and more intimacy in your relationship. So thank you for listening, and I hope to see you in the program.